Hello, everyone, and welcome to Future Nonprofit, a podcast and YouTube channel where we sit down with industry experts, both in and out of the nonprofit space, to talk about how to build and scale the nonprofits our world needs tomorrow. I'm your host, Ted Vaughn, the co-author of Culture Built My Brand and the co-founder of Historic Agency. If you have not yet checked out the audio version of Future Nonprofit, it is a highly produced, amazing 20 to 30-minute journey through each of our guests' stories. Be sure and check that out. Like and follow us wherever you get your podcasts or here on YouTube. And I hope you really enjoyed today's episode. We talked to some amazing people. If you're invited to speak and you're walking on the platform and they ask you for your bumper music, this is the song that has to accompany you every time you walk out onto the platform. What's the piece of music that would, for all of 2026, accompany Ben Webb onto the platform?
Oh, see, now that's a tough question. That might be the toughest question I've ever been asked. So there's the honest answer, and then there's the answer I'd like to give. So I actually had this happen once where I was speaking at a conference, and the conference, I was there for like 3 days before I was supposed to speak. And for the 3 days, everybody was getting on stage and they didn't have any intro music. And the producer of me is like, I'm like, man, you need some intro music. And so I actually went up to the sound guy and was like, I want my session to be a little bit different. Can we put on a song? So the honest answer is Michael Bolton. How can we be lovers if we can't be friends? That's the honest answer. I'd want to...
Of all the songs I've heard, I've never heard Michael Bolton.
Michael Bolton. Part of my calling in life, I feel, is to restore the world back to its original love of Michael Bolton. There's this fad that people think that he's uncool and whatnot. I defy anybody, and I've talked about this quite extensively to my staff and friends and whatnot. I defy anybody to listen to the song "How Can We Be Lovers If We Can't Be Friends" by Michael Bolton loudly in the car, and when he gets to the key change and sings the lyrics, "We can work it out," and it flips to that key change, you don't feel your heart just shift. It's a power anthem. It is a gift to the world that has been long lost and overlooked, and that's the honest answer.
You know what I'll be doing as soon as we're done, Ben? As soon as we're done, I'm going on Tidal and playing.
Put it on loud. You can't just meander. It's not a song that puts on the background. It's not one of those ones where you want to clean. You've got to have the headphones or in your car, fist pumping. It is that's the yeah, because if my friends or my wife listened to this podcast and I heard back and they heard me say anything else, it would be a dang lie. That is my song.
I like you. It sounds like we're both Gen X, so born in '71. So Michael Bolton was absolutely a memory of my growing up.
Oh yeah, and, he's the
hair.
I came to Michael Bolton. Maybe it is a hair thing for me. I came to Michael Bolton actually later in life, but it was one of those. I was actually on tour, driving in a minivan for like hours on end, and my friend that was a cellist, it was on the radio and it was like in the background, and she's like, "Turn this song up," and it came on, and I'm like, it had always been in the ether. And then when it comes to the fore and you actually survey the goodness of that song, it's got everything. It's got the Eddie Van Halen style. I don't want to derail us. I could talk about it for hours.
I graduated high school and went on the road with the Altar Boys, a Christian rock band, and I was the only person in that van listening to Elton John and Michael Bolton and Richard Marx.
Yes, and Hazard by Richard Marx. We've just taken this. I think we've just started another podcast here. There's a whole lot of series of like unknown songs that need to be brought back. Yeah,
I just love the fact that you used the phrase "I came to Michael Bolton" as if you were coming to Jesus.
Exactly. That's totally
like an altar call.
There is this reconciliation back to like your whole self, which is my life before and after realizing who Michael Bolton really was to me.
Oh my gosh. This should be the podcast. This should be the entire show. We should do a special edition.
Like hidden gem songs that the world truly does love and just refuses to admit it.
you've I'm sure traveled the world quite a bit. If you had to leave America and live anywhere, and I think I know the answer, where would you go? What would you choose?
Okay, yeah. So I discussed this extensively with my wife. I have traveled a lot. We've been around the world. We've lived actually. This is the fourth country I've lived in, like for an extended period of time. But it would be New Zealand. New Zealand is, and it would be a town called Raglan, in New Zealand, and it's got I think it's the world's longest left-hand break. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings style Hobbiton mountains that lead into beautiful surf, incredible food, beautiful people. New Zealand has the scenery of like Switzerland and Greenland, the food and the surf of Australia, the snow of Colorado, all condensed together. It's a 2-hour flight from my hometown. Yeah, when I retire, I'll either be near my kids, or if they don't want to be near around me, we'll be in New Zealand in Raglan.
And some of the best wine. I mean, that area has up and coming wine. I mean, the Pinot, even the Rieslings. There's this great winery in New Zealand called Pegasus Bay that make incredible Pinot and Riesling.
Okay, now see, like, yeah, there's a whole other podcast that we could talk about, which is like, where would you want to listen to Michael Bolton to, and what would you want to be sipping?
What would you want to be sipping in New Zealand?
In New Zealand,
yeah. Oh
yeah,
gosh,
yeah.
I have so many thoughts. Okay, I have to keep this going. I want to start Arc 1, kind of story of origin. I find every nonprofit leader that is engaged in their work today meaningfully, there's some story or person or illustration from their youth or something in their story of origin that ties directly to why they're doing what they're doing or how they're doing what they're doing, something meaningful. What would that be for you? What goes back to your story of origin? Could be a coach, a mentor, it could be a teacher, a parent. Talking to Thaddeus, it was his parents and that model that they had for him. What would that be for you? What tethers back to your story of origin that relates to who you are and what you're doing today?
Yeah, so there's two that come to mind. I'll try to tie them together actually. So my parents are pastors in a church in Australia, and they planted a church when I was 2 years old, and they still run it to this day. So the church has always been very central to my family's life story. I grew up sleeping underneath pews, all of that kind of thing, and as the child of pastors, and in Australia, being a pastor, we don't really have many mega churches, etc. It's quite a thankless job, and we grew up quite poor. But seeing my parents continue to pour out for this small community, even through great hardship, to this day is quite inspiring. And there was this moment where I had enough of my hometown. I grew up in a very small coastal town on the east coast of Australia. I was around 19 years old, and I was done with the drama. When you community of 80 to 100 people for 20 years of your life, there's this enough of, I wanted to see the world. And my wife and I decided to book a one-way flight to London. We never ended up getting there. That's another story. But when we actually landed, when we got on the plane to leave, my sister had organized for my father to write, or all of my family members actually, to write us letters, because they kind of sensed that we were going, and it wasn't just a gap year. It was, okay, there's this departure. And she handed me this little present, and it was this little flip book of all of these letters, one from my mum, one from my sisters, my in-laws, etc., so certain friends. And my dad wrote me this letter that was quite nice, but at the end of the letter, he had a PS, and the PS said, "Son, I don't know where your life will take you, but with whatever you do, build the kingdom of God, because it's the only thing that actually remains." And this idea of pouring into something larger than yourself, and seeing him model that brings me back to the story that first came to mind when you asked the question, was like the tangible manifestation of that was, I've been telling this story a lot recently because the lady that I'm about to share about, she just passed about 6 weeks ago. When I was 14 years old, there was this lady called Di Spencer, and Auntie Di, she was for me, even though she wasn't blood. And she'd known me since I was 3 years old. She was a part of our church. And she came up to me one Sunday after church, and she'd noticed that I'd been wearing the same t-shirt, jeans, and my shoes had holes in them every Sunday for the last couple of months. And we were really poor, and you kind of gravitate towards a certain set of clothes. I only wear black now, and I think at the time it was like my favorite surf shirt that I'd gotten for Christmas a couple of years prior. And she asked me really kindly and just said, "Hey, I noticed that you keep wearing the same outfit. What other clothes do you have?" And I was like, "Well, no, these are my favorites, and this is kind of what I have." And so she asked to see my parents, and she grabbed my parents, and she's like, "Can I take Ben for the afternoon?" And they're like, "Sure." And she took me around to all of the coolest stores in my little town, all of the surf stores, and she's like, "You can buy whatever it is that you want here." And I was like, "Well, maybe this," and I felt very shy. And she's like, no, let's get the best shoes. Let's get the, she grabbed, I picked one shirt off the rack. She's like, "Let's get 4 of them in different colors," and pulled them all off. Same thing with like jeans and jackets. And by the end of the day, I had this, it might as well have been $1 million shopping spree for me. I think it ended up being, like $300 or something like that, which is still quite a bit in the, mid-90s. But this idea that somebody saw something that was hidden and used what they had to shape and shift somebody's life in a way. And I didn't feel deserving. I didn't feel like this wasn't something that I was walking around. It wasn't even a need that I really knew that I had. But she saw past what was presented into something that was really deep. And what she offered me that day wasn't necessarily clothes. It was identity. It was value. The way that I would share this to my friends was like the eyes of God turned towards me that day. And this sense of value that, this young boy that was just trying to get by in this small coastal village, and this lady goes, "No, you are worthy of goodness." And since then, I have had a life of great opportunity. Growing up in Australia, I have wonderful parents. I have a thriving community. I've been able to travel the world, meet with great leaders, provide for my family in great ways. And there is this sense of calling in my life, which is to whom much is given, much is required. And how do we turn our eyes to those who often seem unseen, see past what might be presented as initial need, and provide them deep value where their identity is reaffirmed, or even sometimes initially affirmed? And how do we bring them a great sense of love? It was an act of love where I could not give back to Di what she gave to me that day, ever, really. And so that really has shaped all of what I've wanted to try to do with the rest of my life, is like how, in whatever opportunity I have, can bestow upon people a sense of their unique inherent value, and the fact that they are worthy and loved. And how do we express that en masse?
Let's talk a little bit about what you wanted to be when you were growing up, and just kind of the journey of going from your childhood into the career path. Like when you first had visions of career as a child, I can't imagine it was in the nonprofit space. Perhaps it was. What was your earliest memory of, like, I wanted to be a stuntman because, The Fall Guy with Lee Majors was on television. What was yours? What was your vision?
So 2 things, professional skateboarder, and I loved skateboarding. I sucked at it. What I lacked in skill, I made up for in enthusiasm. So I always, in my furthest dreams was like, one day maybe, even though I knew that I really deep down never had the aptitude for skating. And then a filmmaker. My friends and I, from 13, 14, would make little movies back in the VHS days of like we would get 2 video recorders and play, stop, record, and then the linear editing systems were only just starting to be invented, and computer editing really wasn't a thing. And so we got into stop motion. I studied a whole lot of like rebel style filmmakers, the indie filmmakers. Robert Rodriguez was a big hero of mine from like 14, 15 with Desperado, and El Mariachi that came out and before that, where, did that with one camera and I think it was like $5,000 or something. This idea of like, well, with very little, you can do a whole lot and create something that really shapes the world. That was the biggest dream of mine from 14, 15, 16, 17. And I thought that I would actually go into filmmaking as a career. And it wasn't until I was 17 that music started to really come to the fore even more. And this idea of, well, creativity as a whole, but I had more opportunities in the music space than the film space. Living in Australia, it wasn't a burgeoning film scene. It's not like California, et cetera, at the time. But yeah, film was the biggest impetus for me for my developmental years.
Connect the dots between what sounds to be very creative, almost in a counterculture kind of way, right? Rodriguez, skating, music, right? There's a lot of kind of edge to that way of showing up in the world. And now you are in a nonprofit that has, I believe, a certain amount of edge as well, really. But what connect the dots? What career path, college, school? How did you end up where you are today at International Justice Mission?
I am the result of great grace. There's no reason for me to actually be really having this job right now. I didn't go from high school into university, study hard marketing, and then that's not how my career worked. I'll hit the dot points and then feel free to double click on any of them.
Perfect. That's great. Yeah.
So left high school, was a very average student. Decided probably the most common thread was digital marketing. So when I was 15 years old, my best friend broke his leg and then learnt how to code. He was a fan of the television show The X-Files, and he built an X-Files website that became the most successful website for The X-Files in the world. And he got bought out by Fox at 15 years old. His dad was a police officer in my local town, negotiated a deal, and rather than selling out for millions, he got on this retainer of huge amounts of money weekly at 15 years old, and he was this wonderkin story in Australia of like, and at the time we didn't know we were just playing around with computers, and it was the dot-com boom, what we look back now and say that as the dot-com boom in the mid-90s. And I was working at McDonald's and a record store at the time, and he turned to me and said, "Do you want to stop making $13 an hour and start making $50 an hour?" And I was like, "Yes, sir. How do I do that?" And he's like, "I'm getting all of these phone calls to make websites. I don't want to do this." He wanted to make film and write. And he's like, "If you can teach yourself to code, I'll just send all of these clients to you and you can build websites for them." And at the time, one of my dad's friends owned a local computer store and internet service provider. He saw that I was doing this, took me under his wing, hired me in his store, and I would fix computers, I would build computers, start selling them, and then sell them to businesses that were buying computers for their businesses for the first time. I would teach the owners how to use their computer, then build them a website, then network their computers together, train their staff. And I was doing that somewhat through his business and somewhat on the side in the evenings. And so I kind of continued that through high school on the side. And I didn't want to do that as a career. The idea of sitting in front of a computer all day at the time killed me, and even still to this day isn't great. And so that was the common thread. So by 19 years old, I left school. I worked full-time as this computer technician and salesman, building websites, building computers, doing networking, etc. And then while I was doing that, music was coming up, and a friend of mine approached me one day and said, "I want you to come to Bulgaria with me." And they started a not-for-profit working with the Roma Gypsy. And I wanted a sea change and moved to Bulgaria. And we worked and lived, had community with the Roma at the time in Bulgaria. And that led me to this whole other part of the world and this whole other way of living in reality that shifted what I was wanting to do. While over there, realizing that it wasn't sustainable for me, the people that I was traveling with were later in life. They had families, and I was this kid just trying to make ends meet and do right, and wanted a girlfriend and to surf and try to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Decided to come back and study primary school teaching. And so I came back to Australia. I met my wife. I did a bridging course to get back into university, and I studied primary school teaching for 4 years. Got 90% of the way through that degree, fell out of love with primary school teaching like nothing else. Music had come to the fore where I was touring and gigging, and I fell deeply in love with music. And my wife and I decided to move to London, and I was going to defer a year. We'd have a year in London, come back, I'd become a teacher, we have a family, and that's what life looks like. And on the way to London, her boss reached out to a bunch of organizations, and she was in medical research at the time, and said, "I've got this great young woman that's looking for a job." And she got offered a job sight unseen in Belgium, and we didn't know where Belgium was. And so we ended up in Belgium. My wife paid the bills. I wrote music and built websites for 12 months, and met this guy one day that ran this charity called Serve the City. And he needed a communications director, and I had been building websites. He needed a new website. I knew how to talk, and he didn't have any money, and I didn't need that much money. We were very broke, but also just kind of like living off of imagination and love at the time. I was early years of marriage, etc. And that took off. Within 18 months, the charity expanded into, I think it was an additional 20 cities. We forged relationships with the US government, the Australian government, IBM, all of this ideation. These different skills that I had learned through website development, promoting music, exposure to church, etc., travel, all of these things kind of amalgamated together into this experience. My wife ended up getting into medical school, wanted to become a doctor. I was going to leave all of that, pursue music full time. We moved back to Australia. As we land in Australia, she has a change of heart, gets into medical school, full ride, ready to go. We sense this is not right. She wanted to start a family. And so the day that we prayed and made the decision that she wasn't going to pursue becoming a doctor was the day that I got a random phone call from a friend saying, "Do you want to do 2 weeks worth of graphic design support for Compassion Australia?" And I was like, I need the money. I had a handful of gigs booked. My sugar mama plan of my wife becoming a doctor and me being a stay-at-home dad had just blown up. And I was like, I'll take it. And 2 weeks turned into 14 years. And that moved me to the US. And then not-for-profit world kind of coalesced into something where, again, all of the previous experience, access to mentors, international travel, I ended up doing some additional studies, etc., all coalesced into this career path that led to about 2 years ago wanting to depart out of the not-for-profit sector because I had done it. I spent a year doing home building with a friend of mine. We built luxury homes in Colorado Springs, and I decided to like embark in a completely different career path. And this idea of purpose-driven work just couldn't escape my heart. And so I ended up doing consulting and not for pro bono work for not for small and not-for-profits. I'd had all of this experience whilst we were building these houses. And I got to this point one day where it was like, who am I kidding? This is actually what I'm built for. And that happened at the same time that IJM came knocking. And we had this conversation around IJM has a long history of incredible programmatic impact. And as much as the organization's respected, it's not well known around the world. And they presented me this challenge, which was, we've got really big hands and a really small mouth. And I was like, well, I got a big mouth on me. Let's go. And so this idea of doing something different, chasing possibility, and then infusing that into teams for transformation has kind of become the thread of my life.
Similar stories. I didn't pursue home building. I thought I was going to pursue wine. And God quickly said, no, it's a better hobby for you.
It's a killer hobby.
Yeah, it's a fantastic hobby. I mean, it sounds like your story, in like a lot of guests I talk with, is not a story of linear, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, but your story is one of almost tripping and stumbling with a degree of grace and savvy and strategy, but you never ended up where you would have even imagined you'd be a year prior.
Absolutely. This idea of showing up, swinging the bat as hard as you can every day.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Trusting your gut in some ways, but staying really humble and asking a lot of people for a whole lot of help. What I'm trying to teach my kids right now with what I found to be, if there was ever a secret to success, it hasn't been this plan. It's just hard work, consistency over time in every environment, in every room, with every little passion that's in your heart. Show up, try your best, do that a lot. And then success kind of, for use of a better word, kind of manifests in whatever way in your life. So that's kind of been probably the hallmark of my story.
When I talk to young leaders, I talk about the Venn diagram of hard work and hustle. It's just the ticket to the dance. But then strategy, you have to have some degree of strategic vision and intention in your life, right? You can't just show up. There has to be some degree of strategy. But then the third circle is the one that's the most underestimated. It's time. You have to be patient. Time has such a powerful way of delivering on the other two.
Absolutely.
The other two minus time, you'll sabotage yourself because you're in a hurry or impatient. But if you just do the other two, let time work, it's amazing where you'll end up, what you'll be able to do.
I've been reflecting so much on that of recent months and years, because this outcome wasn't a plan, but
not yours at least.
No, not mine. No, but there were many days where, I was at Compassion for 14 years. There was many days when I wanted to quit. I pursued music in somewhat of a full-time capacity for close to 10 years. As a thankless, there was many days of playing to an audience of 2 for soup and a shot of tequila, and making no money, trying to figure out and getting rejection letters from record labels, like putting your heart on your sleeve, but this thing inside of you, which is like, if I just don't quit, if I just keep showing up, something good will happen and I'll get better. I'll learn that piece there. That has been really that's been something that I'm trying to take into this next season of life, where there isn't a grand title that I'm chasing. There isn't, but there is a grand transformation or outcome, knowing that that's going to take time. That's not going to happen in 2-3 months. It is going to be a long obedience in the same direction. That's really what I'm trying to meditate on in this next season, is like, how do I stay faithful in that?
And how do you do it at our age and stage, which is, it's a different rhythm and different capacity than when you're 25.
Yes, absolutely.
At least I feel that way.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm projecting that onto you, but it's interesting. Again, for the producer listening, I think there's something around leadership and that story. I think most of the people listening to this podcast are not on a linear journey. Doctors, surgeons, lawyers, accountants, pretty linear path. Most of the careers in the world today are not. Like, there's never been a better time to have the kind of path that we've had, which is not linear, doing your best, and letting opportunity find you. Because there's jobs that exist. There are jobs that will exist in 10 years that we couldn't even imagine today.
Absolutely.
I want to connect the dots now to IJM and talk a little bit about what you were learning. And one of the themes I want to just begin with. Well, first, just give us the overview of your role at IJM, what you do, just kind of the official. This is your role. This is what you do. This is IJM. Just kind of give us that so we have it for the show.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of International Justice Mission, better known as IJM. IJM is the world's largest justice strengthening organization. We started in the abolition of human trafficking, but ultimately what we look to do is strengthen justice systems for sustainable outcomes for the poor that are suffering from violence. My role is focused on, in this season, transforming our marketing muscle so that we can scale to reach ultimately every person suffering from violence, though our tagline is "Until all are free." But we have this tangible goal of 300 million by mid-2030. That and then onward from that 500 million, we've got this strategy and plan, and that's going to require our brand to scale in really rapid ways. The articulation of our mission to be distilled in a way that it hasn't been historically. For our the stories of transformation, the stories of survivor success, and that hope and transformation is possible, for that to be scaled. Really, my job is to transform our capability to be able to do that.
I want to go to a tension that I find in leadership and culture. We were talking about it earlier. You're clearly a leader of empathy. You care about people. You want to pour into people, right? The story of can't remember her name, Di, taking you shopping, right, reflects, I think, a mindset of wanting to see people's agency and identity and flourishing, which is amazing, which is wonderful. But there's also a tension, because I think too often in the nonprofit space, we're afraid to have hard, honest, managerial conversations about accountability, output, performance. How do you navigate that tension, right? I mean, you have to have people performing. Your mission, your task, your calling is significant. I know IJM hires talented people that perform. Again, I think of Thaddeus and his. How do you manage that tension? What does that look like for you on a day-to-day basis when it comes to culture, leadership, development, management, et cetera?
Yeah, it is a tension. It's a tension to hold. I think the thing that I always, and I wouldn't say that I'm, have perfected this. In that tension, there's a constant development of how do I do better. At the end of the day, that idea of identity being the ultimate thing that we want to not rob people of, in whatever conversation we're having with them, being it calling them to a greater sense of performance, or calling them to an area of development, calling out an issue. I think that if we keep their identity and that cherished part of their identity, which is, they are loved, they are valued. We are all on a journey of becoming, and having that front and center to every conversation, knowing that, and I think people can sense that even when you stumble over words at times, or the anxiety of a developmental conversation kind of comes to the fore, and you're like, how do I express this? And it's tough in a way to be able to express your heart and good care for somebody, when you're also saying things like, I'm not sure that this is actually something that is fulfilling for you, as well as we're not meeting a need for the organization. So how do we reconcile the two? That is a tricky dance to play. where I've landed on is trusting that with every good intent to honor somebody's identity, that at the end of the day, they might not like you. They might not be the biggest fan of yours, because sometimes delivering leadership conversations means that you have to bear the brunt of somebody's internal wrestling with, well, who am I if I'm not a high performer in this season, or if my areas of development have been brought to the surface? Like, what does that mean for me? And human nature is to kind of sometimes shrug that off and go, well, no, that's not my problem. That's their problem. That's their perspective, and their perspective isn't true. Having grace for that. So much of my leadership now is trying to emulate the grace that was shown to me from great leaders, or resolve or behave in a way that was counter to leaders that weren't so great. Where there's areas of development in my own life. Even today, I have the benefit of having great leaders speak in and shape my life, but do so in a way that calls me into my better self, calls me into a deeper sense of identity, doesn't challenge that. But I've had leaders over time where my confusion or my lack of performance or my needs for development was expressed with great frustration on their behalf. That led me to deeper confusion, didn't actually lead me into clarity. And so they weren't getting served, I wasn't getting served, and the problem ended up becoming more systemic. And that's how relationships break down. That's how organizations don't grow. So this idea of coming with honesty, integrity, at the end of my day, I want to be known as a man of good character. And how I've defined for myself what good character is do I run at the light of truth, or do I run from it? And that means that, like, when somebody encounters me, or if they know Ben Webb, there's probably people out there that some of them go, Ben Webb, great person, love encountering with him, great experience. There's likely a lot of others that are like, Ben Webb, had a conversation with him, not so great. I don't like about his vision. I don't like his idea. I have to reconcile that within myself and go, well, at the end of the day, as long as I've stayed true to my character, who I'm being called into, running at that light of truth, is there a problem here? Well, let's address that problem. Do I believe that you are beloved? Yes, I do. So how do we solve the problem by whilst affirming your belovedness? And I'm still in a journey as a leader of developing that muscle and having that conversation in an elegant way with people. And the best of times, I feel like I'm able to land it well, where somebody feels called into a deeper sense of identity, and then a great challenge to grow, and we've provided the tools for them to be able to do so. But at times, human nature trips up, your tongue gets tired. The delta between your heart, your mouth, and what you've said and what they've heard is lost as well. And within that, as much as I express grace for them, I'm having to learn to have grace for myself as well in my own leadership journey.
It's so necessary, because I think it's often the sense of shame and overwhelmedness of leaders that prevents them from leading others well. And so if you don't give yourself grace and patience and permission, then, you're ultimately running from yourself. I talk with a lot of orgs that want to take culture seriously, but then you talk to the managers or you talk to the people, and you find out that they've got 12 direct reports. And it's like, I think the front lines of healthy culture building is that supervisory management relationship. I don't care what books you're reading as a company or what, like that relationship is ultimately what matters to the person on the other side of that power. Like that's the culture. That's the front lines.
But what I would add to that, I completely agree. What I would add to that, though, is the work within the work, which is our leadership is only it is corresponding to the level of leadership that we're accepting in our own lives. What are we developing? What is the grace that we're giving for ourselves? And And the more that we do the work within ourselves, the better that we're able to give grace for others, be able to lead them into a place where I've likely struggled the most in my leadership in previous seasons has been where my interior life, my interior sense of security, what I was striving for was misplaced. And then that gets expressed in sometimes unintentional ways or even unrealized ways through my leadership, be it, I want my team to perform because that's a reflection of my leadership. Like, I want to be known as a good leader and my sense of identity in that. And so you put pressure on a team to perform, not because it's going to achieve a grand mission, but the actual underlying motivation is like, well, I want to be known as the person that has done the great thing and led the great team, and I want people to see me as that. The more that I'm able to lay that down and put my life in service of others, and it's less of me being seen as the person. And this is a real struggle for marketers as well, because our natural tendency is like, look, I know how to put, like, I could jump on a circuit, I can do the whole thing. It's, like, I want my LinkedIn to be popping, or like all like there is that. And the career and the even the sector of marketing, if you look at even beyond the not-for-profit sector, there is this approval that's given to that of like, well, that's actually what you're meant to do. You're meant to write the book and become the speaker and be seen as the next so-and-so. And so really then what you end up doing is like, well, I'm using all of you from me to achieve this great thing so that my sense of internal validation is forward and achieved. Whereas the more that I lay that down, I go, it's actually not about me, especially in the not-for-profit world, where if we're truly trying to be successful, we're working ourselves out of a job. We have to, like, my ultimate goal is where we've got such incredible, especially within IJM, my ultimate job is like for governments, for communities to have such strength and justice systems that IJM is not necessary anymore. That there is this community that thriving, like that comes around people so that they can thrive. So that means that if I'm using this to bolster my own identity and my own career,
yeah, you're getting in the way.
I'm getting in the way of the mission. And so laying myself down for the mission, and then secondly is what I've realized is the things that the projects that we work on, the products that we try to build, the campaigns that we develop, all well and good, and they require talent, grit, and hard work. But they're sandcastles. People will forget everything that we build. And I had this experience in a previous part of my career where I had worked really hard for years on certain things, and then it all just went away very quickly. And I remember sitting with somebody over a drink one night, and I was just lamenting with them and apologizing to them because their career was caught in the wake of this wave. And they said to me, it was never about the work, with sunflower seeds. I'm like, and this gentleman said to me, he's like, I'm going to go work for other organizations. And what I've learned through this process, I'm going to take. And if we're truly looking towards transforming the sector, and that's really what, like, my heart for the not-for-profit sector is, we're always seen as laggards. We always look to for-profit organizations for true innovation. We look for for-profit leaders for great leadership. Whereas a lot of the times, actually, it's an identity crisis within the not-for-profit sector where we're like, well, we have to because we don't have the resources or the money. Whereas actually, like, if you look at it really, the talent that I've encountered in the not-for-profit sector and then my engagement with people in the for-profit sector, there is a parity there.
Yeah.
I do not see it. And more often than not, you see great enterprising people come from the for-profit sector and then be ignited in ways that they never had before, or challenged in ways they never had before in the not-for-profit sector. So my heart is for the not-for-profit sector to increase its, strengthen its own identity so that those in need, be it food, water, justice, medical care, whatever that is, see that with great alacrity. They see that with great speed coming towards them. That requires us to operate in a different way. Well, if I'm about my career, I'm getting in the way of not just my own mission, I'm getting in the way of that transformation. Whereas if I'm more about others, if I'm pouring into my team, knowing full well that they're probably going to quit someday and go work for another organization or another not-for-profit in another leadership position. But if that not-for-profit succeeds in greater ways, that creates great, healthy competition for my not-for-profit to get better, my team develop, the sunflower seed garden grows and grows and grows, and therefore this great benefit comes to so many people, and we all reap the benefit anyway. So it's where a little drop in the ocean ended up becoming a massive wave.
I have so many thoughts around all of this, but the first one is the nonprofits that I think will decline, and I think there will be a decline. We're at almost 2 million nonprofits in the U.S. today. I think and they've been on steady increase as philanthropy has been in steady decrease. I think we're going to see a decline for the first time in decades. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see 25% less nonprofits in America, and I think it's how it should be, frankly, because I think for so many nonprofits, their organization has become the end instead of a means to a greater end. The nonprofit game, the fundraising, their role, the machinery. We're not actually solving homelessness. We're just managing it. The mission has changed because, anyway, so I think there's something really powerful. And I think that goes full circle to what does it mean to then. The last thing I'll say about that before I ask you another question. Well, I talk to more and more millennials and Gen Zs. They don't know what a nonprofit is, and they could care less. To them, it's a tax status. It's not a sector or a place they want to be. And I think in some ways, if you look at the for-profit space today, they're competing on mission oftentimes better than the nonprofit space. Like this idea of what it means to change the world. You look at brands like Liquid Death. They are... Now, they're not operating with the same transparency and with the same rigor that nonprofits are required. But I think in many ways, the game around purpose and changing the world is no longer reserved by the nonprofit space or owned by the nonprofit space. It's broadened, which is going to make it far more difficult for brands like Charity Water and IJM to compete for talent. Which leads me to my next question for you. We're talking to Charity Water and Scott Harrison. One of the comments he made was, listen, in 2025, nothing's working. Nothing's working like we thought it would. Everything that we thought would happen isn't happening. There's all this friction. All the things we thought are like the world's changing super fast. What's your experience with that when it comes to marketing, channels, awareness? What's working, what's not working? To what extent are you feeling the headwinds and the friction of just this crazy pace of change that we're all experiencing?
In one way, in one category, I agree. Like in one frame, I agree. Like I do sense the change, and trying things that haven't worked. But I don't see this as a 2025, 2026 issue. I've experienced this for the last 10 years. In the sector. The thing that I'm finding works is the fundamentals, like truly the fundamentals. And it's when we get so caught up in the idea of innovation that we lose sight of the fundamental. And so much of what I'm investing right now in my team is to excelling in the basics. So we've got this marketing framework that I've rolled out across all of IJM, where we're studying it. And really what I see as the next big impartation of my career into IJM is what could be summarized in 5 key statements: is being insight-driven, concept-led, powered by story, scaled by technology, then measured and refined. So understanding who, what, and why it is that we serve. What are their needs? Not what are our needs? Not-for-profits are very narcissistic. Like, we're doing great work, etc. And so this idea of like, how do we get out of our own way and discover, even on the donor side, especially for those in marketing frontiers, what are their needs? What gets them out of bed?
The donor value prop, such a missed art.
Exactly. So that requires like a deep study of segments, personas, like really getting into that. So being insight driven first and foremost, then concept led, big ideas. And you can innovate with concept, but so often we like try to trip up and do something fancy and cool. Whereas like for us here at IJM, one of the things that we stumbled upon was we had these words, "until all are free," written across our walls. It was on t-shirts. And people, when I asked them, I was like, "What is this?" They're like, "Oh, it's something we just used to say." I'm like, no, that is the grand concept. We don't need to reinvent something. This is actually the grand concept in which all that we're doing is striving towards. And then telling remarkable stories with storytelling empathy bridges. This is another lost art within not-for-profits. We tell the story of say that, like right now in my own line of work, unfortunately, like great violence is inflicted upon millions of children and women and men in ways that I have never experienced in my own life in any way. Like, sure, everybody's been dealt injustice and I've got my own stories, but I heard one this morning that like by 7:30, I'm shaking in my coffee cup and I've been exposed to this for 20 years. So there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. How do I not have sympathy for somebody, but move towards them with empathy and then great compassion, that leaning into their story, creating empathy bridges where the donor can see themselves in the story, not as a hero, because that's what not-for-profits tend to do as well, is like, well, you're the hero and you're the one that's going to come in and rescue them, which is not true. They're a key part, but seeing themselves and being invited into this story of transformation, the hero's journey that's taking place in the developing world, that's taking place in Colorado Springs, in Nashville, and wherever. These uncommon stories of great good. How do we tell them in incredible ways? And then when we move to scale by technology, again, everybody's freaking out about AI, where, we're building out our own chatbots, all of these kinds of things. And we are like, and it's good to invest in these areas. And I think that we will see great advancement and certain areas of disruption in this area as well. But ultimately with scale by technology, for me, to distill it down to its simplest form is, how do we personalize at scale? How does somebody feel seen, if they're one of millions of donors? How do they still feel seen, and how do we know their story so that we're able to serve them in a relevant and valuable way? And then measured and refined, being really bluntly honest with ourselves, objective versus subjective measures. And so much of what I've encountered throughout my career is people building in a campaign to keep the organization happy versus actually communicating well to a donor, or fudging the numbers and going, well, like, no, we were successful because ultimately we wanted to achieve this, versus looking at the campaign and going, actually, we spent a whole lot of money and that thing sucked.
It's the psychology behind feeling more passionate about your thing than the cause that your thing serves.
And again, like if I bring it back to identity, this idea that I'm on a journey of becoming, when I can look at objectively what I've tried to do and go, this is what I set out to achieve. I did not achieve that. What went wrong? How did I not serve my donor well? How did I not serve my team well? Then that flips back into a deeper insight that leads to, a better concept, a better idea, better storytelling, better use of technology, etc. So while I agree that like what we're doing right now in the not-for-profit sector isn't working, if you look at like giving across the board, it's not increasing. It's basically stayed stagnant in terms of the pool, and we're all fighting for a bigger slice of the same pie, which turns into something that's just, self-perpetuating and unhealthy. If we really truly want to break out, my belief is that we need to hold ourselves to a greater level of accountability. I'm not trying to compete with Charity Water or Compassion or World Vision for the next dollar. I'm competing with Apple. I'm competing with Amazon for relevance and value. If somebody needs to find that relevance and value to go, I'm not going to buy the next iPhone. I'm going to give that to an organization that I believe will have great good, but also deliver great good, not just for those beneficiaries that they're serving, but myself. The transformation that I receive from giving is more valuable to me than the product. I think that if we do that by focusing on the fundamentals of marketing, that's where the great transformation comes from.
Yeah, the fundamentals is such a good word. I remember hearing Seth Godin say, or I read it someplace, people don't actually want to give you their money. They want you to change how they feel. And if you can change how they feel about themselves, about the world, they will give you their money.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the giving has changed and transformed my life and the lives of those that I know and love in such profound ways. Unlike it's a unique activity when I give of myself, when I give of what I've got freely and willingly. I've never given and not felt something shift in my heart, especially sacrificial giving. There is such deep truth to that. So I have no concerns with asking people to give because I believe that I'm giving them back something great good. However, that being said, is my team's responsibility, ultimately my responsibility, and the organization's partial responsibility is to ensure that we are showing up not just for one side of the organization that is the beneficiary of whatever the mission is, be it, international justice mission or wherever, but we see the great collective and see our responsibility as bringing them together. What we're working on at international justice mission is the movement of justice. What is our role in serving our movement of justice and making sure that everybody feels deeply known in that movement. They see themselves, they see their contribution, and they are receiving a contribution within that movement as well. They feel ownership of it. And our role is not the arbiters, but we are stewards. We steward the movement, we serve the movement, we bring people together, and then we trust them. We trust their input. We trust that resources will come. We trust that power structures will shift because humanity is invested in. Where I find we get in our own way is where we see ourselves as the top of the pile, and we're not. We're the bottom. And so much of what I'm trying to do is like deconstruct marketing. Where it's like, yes, I want to make RJM known in every household. I want people to know not just the acronym, but the full name. I want them to understand the brand. Of course, like I'm a marketer. I get the job of CMO by knowing what I'm doing. But ultimately, the way I want to achieve that is for somebody to, like, I've never woken up in the morning and gone, oh my gosh, I really have to make sure that somebody is released from violence today. Like I haven't felt that, before working for RJM, that was an inherent human need. But this idea of, wow, I really want to belong to something that's larger than myself. I see a great pain in humanity, and I want to know how to solve that. I see hurt, and I would love to do something. I feel like I've been given much, and I want to contribute that in a way. I want to teach my children how to do this. I want to teach their friends how to do it. How do I do that? That's a great need in me. And International Justice Mission, among a lot of other charities, provide this avenue for that to be just a natural part of our lives. And so I want to both market the opportunity, but then get out of the way and have people's individual identities really run with a mission in their own unique expression.
I want to get practical for a moment because a lot of the organizations that I work with and that we talk with regularly are in this structural tension, and typically it's around the relationship, the responsibility, the integration of marketing and fundraising. And the relationship with the CMO, the CDO, how those things work together, two sides of the same coin. What's the experience? IJM, significant organization doing significant work, seems to be doing a lot of things well. What's the structure like in that regard, and how's that structure working, and do you see it changing in the future?
It's been healing for me. It's been fantastic. Genuinely, the thing that I've encountered, hand on heart at IJM is mission first. And so I think that I've inherited, part of it has been some of the hard lessons that IJM has had to learn. So when I came in, they had tried their hand, and different marketing leaders had tried to do different things. And there was this sense of like, we're throwing a Hail Mary and hopefully this works. But I came in very clear on my philosophy, which is marketing is not a glorified creative department. We're not a service department that just does graphic design, a couple of videos, and people go, that's the nice marketer's job. Like, that's not what we do. If I work for any, serious organization, I'm held against key measurements, objective measurements, one of them being revenue. And if I'm not bringing in revenue, bringing in, like, showing tangible examples of growth, then I'm getting fired. And so really what I came in to do was, like, I set out objective measures. Here's what you should be holding me accountable towards, like increase in brand awareness, increase in revenue, mass engagement. Like that's something that we've taken on. So what I've encountered at IJM has been an organization that was very, very open to that idea. My counterpart that does a lot of our fundraising, and my counterparts that lean into that, they see the value of what it is that we contribute to their work in the form of creative communications, assets, etc. But they also see us as revenue partners. They can't succeed without for them to meet with a donor and have that conversation. Well, brand awareness has to be clear. The mission has to be articulated. For them to have those resources that bring a fidelity to our mission in a way that their conversation might not be able to, well, our team has to really know what it is that we're doing and know their donors as well. So an example of this being, we embarked on a global segmentation, and it wasn't just a marketing tool, it was seen as an organization transformation tool. And when I say it was healing, a great example of this was when I first presented the idea of a segmentation to the executive team. So this idea of, we're going around the world and we're going to do a needs-based segmentation. We're not going to ask them about IJM. We're going to ask them what motivates them to give. I'm the one marketer in a room with International Justice Mission. Most of them are lawyers, and I'm the college dropout. Right? Like, that's the thing. Like, so there is this, like, I'm talking a lot of different terms here. And the response, Gary Haugen actually said this, and I wrote it down. It just was this moment of great affirmation where he said, this feels like a tool that's going to help us love people really well. And I was like, yes, that's it. And then they were like, how do we apply the segmentation to our own staff? How do we apply this to the people that we're working with in our partnerships? How do we move beyond just the donor-centricity of a segmentation and embed this? And there was this drawing from a marketing capability. My partner, Blair Burns, who leads our program, Blair talks to me every week about this new idea about how marketing can help our programs advance. So seeing our capability not just as this, they make the videos or they do the posters, but there is this capability or this suite of capabilities that can actually grow our mission in really tangible ways. And then coming to us with curiosity on, like, how that might be. That's what I've encountered. And what I'm seeing in the future is we're on the hook now to deliver, and not just deliver in a way that marketing traditionally has in not-for-profits. But one of the great challenges I've got to sort out is, like, how does marketing deliver for programs? How do we do government advocacy in a different way? I've not done that in my career previously, like in the ways that IJM's programs have gone about this, but there is this desire and we have these skills. So how do we apply that? Staff care. Well, there is a great way to be able to communicate well to staff and, internal, external communications, the thread. But our brand truth, how does that thread from our staff get expressed out to every facet in which IJM touches? That's a challenge that we have to overcome. So my team's on the hook to deliver that. But I believe that as we deliver that, the organization will both gain the benefit from the marketing muscle, and the marketing muscle itself will evolve, and what we would traditionally be doing in the form of donor centricity will get better as well, because we're learning how to apply it in other areas, and that's going to feed innovation for our fundraising.
Really quick, the trust in government, media, corporations has never been lower. Like the Edelman Trust Barometer is a frequent read for me. IJM functions at this interesting intersection of it's a large nonprofit. It's become a bit of its own institution or movement. What's the intentional way in which you mitigate the trend towards distrusting large institutions? How does IJM think about that, or is it just a natural outcome that you have high trust because of the things that you're doing, or is it something that you're cognizant of and thinking about?
I would say that the thing that we're cognizant of is excellence, true objective excellence. So in the areas where we are trusted, and I say this not as the arbiter of said excellence. I've only been with IGM for close to 2 years, but like its history is a result of this. Gary's leadership is a large in part with this. He said this to me when we first started. He's like, I want our not-for-profit not to be known as a not-for-profit. I want a government to look at us and say, you're excellent at what you do. And then all of our motivations, be it our faith, be it like we've got really strong spiritual rhythms or a community of spiritual formation, like all of that is not the outcome. It is the fuel for excellence. And so where there is distrust, I think that comes because either we're trying to not tell the whole truth and people are sniffing at that and going, something doesn't smell right here. Like there isn't that transparency, or there hasn't been an excellence in the way that we've been communicating. And so right now in this season, the thing that we're focused on the most as trust is eroding in institutions and media, et cetera, is like when we look at our programs are arguably some of the most effective in the world in history. We've got some of the most effective justice strengthening programs that have ever existed since the days of Abraham Lincoln. People don't know about that. I'm fine for them inquiring because it's actually really, really good. So the gap is not what the work is. The gap is how we're communicating that. So when people are like, well, that surely can't be true, we're not creating enough avenues for people to understand the work. So in the areas that like IJM, as an example, I have no concerns with people rifling through our garbage. We're not a perfect organization. There's no perfect organization. But when the leadership quality, the programmatic quality, where there, with every intent there is towards excellence and some sort of great outcome. So I've got no concerns with people coming into our house and checking out what it is that we do. Where there is distrust or a gap for me would be like, well, are we communicating this effectively or not? And right now, what we're trying to get better at, and my great challenge is that people have lost hope. They've lost faith that change is possible. And that's actually counter to what we're really seeing. We've seen trafficking of minors in Kolkata all but eradicated. I was walking the red light district there. Like we were doing some work there, walking the red light district a few weeks ago, just before the end of the year. And it was not existent. And when I turned to our team in India and going like, guys, come on, show me the pain. They're like, well, it's not here. It got fixed. Like the government's fixed it. Like we came in, we partnered with the government, it's fixed, it's been solved. Whereas 10 years ago, I was walking in the same district. I don't make it a habit to, go through red light districts, but like I was walking through the same area. And because I'm a big white guy in India, people are coming up, soliciting. That doesn't exist. That people don't see that because we're not telling the story effectively. So right now, my great challenge is like, I have to put megaphones to the transformation, reignite hope where it has been lost in people's hearts, where they're like, if I'm giving my money to a charity, it's going to be spent incorrectly. Well, no, that's not true. Or like, it's really not going to be fruitful and it'll be good for a year and then it'll flitter away. Actually, that's not true. transformation isn't possible. That's not true. It is. So we have to not convince people. I don't even have to sell them. I just have to show them the fruit.
So you're a C-suite leader. You've used this term excellence a lot, and excellence is such a squishy idea. What does it look like for you as a C-suite leader to ensure excellence is understood and clarified down the ranks, so it's not just some subjective, it's excellent because Ben liked it? Because that too often happens, right?
Yeah, so marketing framework. Objective measures. And a lot of what we're doing right now with our methodology in that first step of being insight driven, we're actually currently developing a process where any body of work really tactically starts with a brief. That brief has to have an audience defined. It has to have a suite of objective measures, has to have internal and external customers clearly articulated. And then that brief becomes the arbiter of truth as to whether the thing, be it a campaign, a video, etc., was successful or not. And so I've stood in front of our entire leadership group, even beyond the executive team, and said, there will be campaigns that we launch at RJM in the future that you all hate, and I don't care.
Because they will work.
It'll come back to, and one of two things is going to happen. It'll either have worked, and I'll be able to show you the results and go you hated it, and it worked, and therefore, you're welcome. Or alternatively, you hated it, and it didn't work, not because you hated it, but because of these reasons. We have to get better at this. This is what we're changing. And it's not because so-and-so liked it or didn't like it, or Ben did or not. We move from the subjective to the objective. So we're actually right now doing a lot of work around focusing on our processes where objectivity in the briefing process at the very impetus of whether something gets greenlit or not is actually so it's quite frustrating. It's hard for our team to kind of swallow, because we're saying to them, you're used to being able to just spin up a body of work and just go run with it and pull people together and use enthusiasm to drive something forward.
To chase cool.
And what we're saying to them is, it's probably going to take you a couple of days to write a decent brief.
Exactly.
And so we'll do less with greater sense of excellence, or at least an objective measurement for what that excellence is, so that the feedback loop is true and clear, and that therefore the transformation won't happen quickly, and we're not chasing cool or that quick win, and we're seeing, false positives. But the transformation is incremental and sustainable over time, and we can look at the data clearly and say, these are the things that we actually did that moved the needle. And that does mean that ideation has to go through a greater filter of rigor.
That's so good.
Yeah, so that's what we're going from methodology. What I started with was, let's all get unified. What is marketing? How does marketing show up? And how do we at RJM do marketing? Insight-driven, concept-led, powered by stories, scaled by technology, measured and refined. Let's study what that means. Now, underneath that methodology, let's build the tools within each of those categories to enable us to to enact excellence there. So insights, let's start with the segmentation. We'll move into personas. We'll do journey mapping, service blueprinting. With scaled by technology, we'll implement a CDP, we'll do personalization engines, we'll look at our CRM, all of that tactical stuff. Then our process, how does our team and any body of work that encounters marketing, even if it's created elsewhere, come into this filter, and how do we make sure that we're focusing on the right things? Well, the brief becomes the grand filter. And so we're doing a lot of training, and a lot of my job is working with other departmental leaders and saying to them, you're going to get less in the foreseeable future, but what you will get and what we believe you will get will achieve a greater result, a better outcome, or at minimum have clarity as to where it went wrong, and we will be able to tangibly improve so that we ultimately grow and scale. And you can hold us accountable to this versus it's well, he did this and she did this, and that's not helpful. So and what I'm finding is that leaders have got a deep thirst for that level of accountability, transparency, and clarity of process. And it does require grace, because it does mean that in some areas that we're slower in our delivery, and everybody wants faster, better tomorrow. But what we ultimately want to get to is better quality and a greater scale.
And you're going to know faster if something's not working.
Totally. But that takes time from us to get to that point, right? Like that's yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. My comment to Charity Water was, listen, I think as trust continues to get fractured in corporate America, it's not going to vanish, it's going to migrate. Trust is going to move, and you have a huge opportunity to regain trust that is currently departing from all these institutions that people are losing faith in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where our organizations, I agree with you that, I think we will see a decline in not-for-profits. I think the ones that have been built with good character, they've got the fortitude. Leadership is showing up for the right thing. They are mission-centric. They might not be perfect because dealing with humans isn't perfect, but their programmatic outcomes are achieving results.
If anything, they're maybe messier, and they're playing by a different playbook. They're actually they're not concerned about the charity navigator watchdog organizations and all there's so much of that BS that I think actually serves to restrict missional outcomes by preserving some sort of false notion of what a good nonprofit should be.
I 1000% agree. It's one of those things of if I get so caught up in that, I'm moving my eyes from the ultimate outcome, which is there's a child in front of a webcam right now getting abused. So and nobody has ever fixed that. If they could, it would have been fixed. So all of my innovation should be focused on I want to get that child out of that situation as fast as humanly possible. What do we have to do? How is that going to help me? If that's going to help how much of that time we always having to make this trade-off where I think we have to be continually reminded that the ultimate outcome is not our own good. The ultimate outcome is for that child. The way how Gary got me to work for IJM was he said, Ben, we're the world's biggest anti-bully brigade, and you're going to make some enemies. So if you want to make enemies, these are traffickers. These are people that are inflicting violence upon children, women, men. They're enslaving them. And we stand in the way of the bullies. I'm sign me up. That's actually what when my kids don't know about all of the ins and outs of IGM because I've got an 11-year-old and a 10-year-old and I don't want to teach them about sexual abuse right now. But when I ask them what do we do? They'll say, we help kids. And I'm like, damn right we do. That's ultimately what I'm working towards. And if I'm working towards my own career, if I'm working towards my own sense of identity and self-worth, I'm putting more emphasis on me than I am them.
Right.
And implicitly, the mission is feeling that tension. My team is feeling that tension. Whereas the more work that I do internally, which is actually, what do I truly desire? I desire that no child gets abused. I desire that no woman gets beat. I desire that no man gets tricked and enslaved for decades away from his family. I desire all of that greater than I desire my own career. That becomes the great filter, and teams buy into that too.
And if you can 5x your impact by 2xing or even, God forbid, 3xing your overhead, you do it. But you know how many board members I've talked to who are like, no, we could never 3x our overhead. I'm even if you knew it would result in 5, 6, 8x,
totally.
They're literally their vision for solution has been constrained by their need to play by an antiquated rule book.
We could do a whole other discussion on the pitfalls of the 80-20, how it is something but is it 80-20 or is it 79.5 versus there's these implicit rules that get put across them. And I think that the heart of that is right in the sense of we are held to a great account where somebody is giving sacrificially to us that we are to steward that well. But how we steward that comes down to, are we ultimately achieving the end goal of our mission as fast as effectively as possible?
These things always start well. I mean, you think about the Presbyterian or Lutheran denominations. They were all the Book of Order and all the rules were meant for good reason. They just became they enslaved the mission.
That's where I keep coming back to fundamentals. If we serve people really well, if we focus on that, versus all of the noise of, and I found this coming into the CMO role. As soon as you come in a CMO role, your inbox starts getting filled with like, come speak at this and do this. And there's this desire that builds up in you, which is like, and now I get to put on like, yeah, guys, I made it. Whereas actually at the end of my days, so let me actually, like, I'll give you this story. So my uncle, I had this experience 2 years ago where I encountered 3 people that were dying over 3 days. And one of them was my uncle. And my uncle was my hero. He still is my hero growing up. And by God's grace, he's still alive and actually doing quite well. But he got given the phone call of stage 4 cancer. But my uncle had an incredible career in technology. He brought internet banking into Australia. He lauded computer scientist, etc. Like, great career, has all of the markings of success. Growing up, as a poor pastor's kid, you're looking at your uncle going, well, that's what it could look like. Wouldn't that be fantastic? And I met with him 2 years ago over coffee back in Australia. And at the time, it was seen as like, this could be the last conversation I have with him. And so I wanted to ask him the question, which was like, what happens when you get the phone call? Like when you get the phone call from the doctor. And so drummed up the courage and was like, what happened in your heart? What happens in your life? And it was so profound. He just goes, Ben, everything became really, really clear, really, really instantly. He's like, I forgot about every brand I ever worked for. I forgot about every promotion I ever had. I forgot about every piece of success that anybody bestowed on me. And the questions that were coming to my head was, do the people around me know that I love them? Are my children set up for success? Do they have what they need to live a good life? Have I contributed some good? Like that, he's like, I forgot about everything else. And those were the things. He's like, I've got, at the time, we thought it was like days left. He's like, and then he just looks at me and goes, you know how I feel about you, right? And that's all that he wanted to articulate at the end of his days. I had 2 other experiences that just reaffirmed that message within this really finite period of time. And I'm holding that very close to my heart in this new season of executive leadership, which is like, at the moment, yes, I'm the CMO for International Justice Mission. That's a great gift. There'll come a day where nobody associates my name with this role. Nobody cares who I am. They won't care about the teams that I've run or what I do. And so with my last days, how do I want to be remembered? What do I actually want to be known for? And so my great success will be sunflower seeds. Have I poured into people and they've been able to express great good into the world? And if I know that that child has been moved from that webcam, I don't care if anybody knows my name has been associated with that, but if that has happened and she or he is able to thrive in their God-given potential, so when I get called by for-profits, they ask, like, you get headhunted every now and again. You can't buy me because you can't buy that. That is a life lived differently, and that is leadership expressed differently. And so for me, that is the ultimate thing that I'm trying to achieve with this, is like, in this season of service, in this sector right now, for this organization that I dearly love, that I'm very proud to be associated with, how can I ensure that it's not about Ben Webb got promoted again or did this thing? It's not actually about that. It's the sunflower seed has been scattered and good will blossom in the hardest parts of the earth. The kingdom is advanced because it's the only thing that actually remains. My uncle is still alive. I'm grateful to the Lord for that. But there will come a day where he and I will go, and what I will remember now is not his success or all the things that Lord, is him looking at me across the coffee table and going, you know how I feel about you, right? And I was able to answer yes. And I want that for my team. I want that for my leaders. Like, I want them to know, like, you know how I feel about you, right? Like somebody giving of themselves to better others. I'm proud to be associated with these people. And if I want that to be the ultimate outcome of my leadership, is for them to know that their value, no matter where they go, what they do, if it ultimately achieves this greater good, it's beautiful. That's really I think that will become a great transformation for our sector when, but more often than not, it comes from, I've had to learn this lesson the hard way. Like, I haven't lived that way for years in my previous leadership. Like, I can look back at times where I'm like, I was really more about my thing versus their thing. And so, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's such a great lesson. I remember I had this amazing career at this mega church, and when I left the mega church and was consulting and coaching, and I would always talk about the things we accomplished, and like you said, sandcastles. Within 4 years, all those things we accomplished were gone. The TV show didn't exist anymore. All the amazing things that had happened were gone. It was a nightmare. But what remained were the careers of all these incredible people on my team that were better because of their time with me. And and to this day, I still get that crew together for dinner at my house, even though it's been, 15, 18 years later, because that's what matters. And we laugh about all the things that we've done that have gone.
Like even the silly things, like some of the people that I work with now, I've worked with for 10 years. And there is this sense of like, I actually had a new employee start yesterday. And what I said to her was, take time to really see the hearts of the people that you're about to start working with, because that's going to be the ultimate gift that you get from all of this. Yes, there'll be this great good that comes from advancing the mission of RGM, but I can call up name after name and story after story of somebody that has made an indelible imprint on my heart. Thad being one of them. I had the gift of working with that guy for 12, 18 months. And I consider him, huh? I consider him, yeah, he's a great guy. And through our relationship, impact on my heart in my life shifted in a unique way. I can call story after story with that. That's a gift that I'll think of that when I'm 70, 80, or however long the Lord wills for me to have. Like, that comes to my mind is like, how have I served that relationship, honored God in that relationship more than served myself? And I think that then people see that. And when the movement, people are drawn to that. They're drawn to that. That becomes magnetic. And for us as organizations to communicate that intent is, I think, the grand challenge of the marketer.
For more stories from experts in the industry and to learn how to take your nonprofit into the future, like this video, subscribe to our channel and podcast, and visit makehistoric.com/insights. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Ted Vaughn, and this is Future Nonprofit.